We decided to do 5 different classes. An elite class.
Interesting, John, your idea.
Well, I knew you would react positively.
I did say this is a great idea.
This is great. Elitism.
Yeah. Whenever you say the 1%, you're actually happy about it.
Nice, Nick.
Nick is happy about it when Josh is happy about it when it's the 1/1,000,000th of a percent.
Wow. I wish I were. If I was one of those people, you think I'd be talking to you, Yahoos.
Well, that's why we call you Elon Peterson.
Nobody calls me that, Nick. Don't put it on the internet.
Not to your face.
Nice.
So there's an elite class.
Yeah.
There's an upper class.
Sure.
There's the middle class. There's the lower class. There's the basement.
That's a good band.
What is, John, what are the parameters that we are working with here? Because I did ask you, are we trying to prognosticate like 5 years down the road? Or are we just looking at the here and now?
Well, we're looking at the here and now.
With a little bit of past and a little bit of future.
But how much you weigh something, I think is important. So I'll just give you my example. When I was looking at this, I was looking at where I see the program, each of the 18 Big Ten programs.
All 18 of them.
Where I see them now in terms of what they have been recently.
Yeah.
And what they project to be next season.
As in 2025.
Yes.
Yeah. Not
going beyond that.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a column A, a little bit of column B. It's probably weighed a little more heavily into what they have been.
Yes, that's how I did mine. I did mine in terms of doing a little bit of what you had been, which, as we're going to talk about Michigan, that they present such an interesting kind of test case because some would say, well, then they're obviously elite, right? And neither of us will have them in our elite category.
Well, on that subject, here we go with the elite class.
So a tiny bit of disagreement.
And I'm surprised at the disagreement. Because initially, when I started this exercise, I did have Michigan in this class. And I figured you would have Michigan in this class and that the argument would be over Michigan, not just because Josh favors Michigan
pilled.
but
I'm not.
But just from the purposes of this exercise, I almost had Michigan, and then I decided I was going to drop them down. So let's talk Oregon.
Okay. Yeah, and for the record, if you're wondering, okay, so who do you guys have? We both have the Buckeyes.
I only have Ohio State.
And I have the Ducks. My argument for Oregon is that they are coming off of a 13-0 start, a Big Ten championship season, a number 1 overall seed in the playoff, and then, they laid a stink bomb in the college football playoff. But I think if you are in that spot of the sport and there doesn't look to be anything slowing them down, and for me, I don't see, they didn't lose their coach, right, which that's going to come up with Michigan in a moment. They didn't lose their coach. They still have Dan Lanning. They're a great recruiter. They plug the holes that they need, and they entered the league. And, a lot of people would think, oh, West Coast school, yada, yada, yada. They came in, they won. They beat Ohio State in the regular season. They beat Penn State. They beat 3 other marquee programs in the conference, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, all in 2024. Now, Michigan was a lesser version, but they still beat all of them. I mean, they were the number 1 overall seed. I just think they are as elite of a program as you can be without having the ultimate hardware in college football.
And that's why I never even considered them.
That's wild. You can't be elite unless you win a natty?
I don't think so. Because when I was thinking elite of, all right, when this team walks on the field, do I think they have a chance? Do I think they could win the national championship? Yes, because I've seen it. I've seen it with Ohio State.
You didn't think that with Oregon, though?
No.
Really?
Only because I haven't
really
seen it. So a little bit of this is punishing them for their past. You're right on all of the other accounts, all of last year's things, but we've talked about Oregon in this vein before.
But again, I think you can be elite without winning a natty.
I don't.
4 years ago, you wouldn't have had Georgia as an elite program?
Before they won? No.
Really? Even though they'd been to a natty and lost, they were often a top 5 team, great recruiter. They were not elite.
They would have been considered more than Oregon would have.
Really?
Well, what's Oregon been the last 3 years?
Last year they were 13-1. The year before they were 12-2. The year before that they were 10-3. They finished 3rd, 6th, and 15th.
Those are very good records. There's nothing to sneeze at.
It's a real rags to riches story for them.
They've been awesome. They're on the doorstep. They are. When a team finally wins their first natty ever, they are going to be the team that does it above anybody else in college football.
And you may be right about that. But because that's the only reason. That's the only reason I docked them is because they had not done it.
Yeah.
And last year they had all of those things. And then what did they do? Laid a giant
They did lay a
duck
giant
egg.
But, Buckeyes beat everybody last year in the playoffs.
They did. So then it moves us to the upper class, to which I have Oregon here.
Yeah.
And you didn't. But we do agree on the other two teams, Penn State and Michigan. So let me ask you this. Penn State. Penn State has had very good seasons. Penn State this year is considered one of the favorites to win this year. Couldn't you make your same argument that Penn State should have been in the elite class, given what's expected of them this year?
No, that's a very fair question, and you're probably right. And so I guess I'm going to use some of your reasoning. I got to see them do it. They don't even win the conference. It's been a decade since they won the Big Ten conference. Meanwhile, Penn State or Oregon entered in 2016, 9 years. Since they
was
won
it
the
16? I get all the years confused now.
Yeah. So they last won their conference, the only time that they have won one under James Franklin. But here's the other thing too. Oregon put pelts on the wall last year. Penn State does not have any pelts. They do not beat good teams in the conference. They don't. Whenever Michigan's good, they lose to them. Whenever Ohio State's good, which is every year, they lose to them. And then last year they got a shot at the Ducks, and the score is nowhere near as indicative of how Oregon controlled that football game. I need to see it from Penn State before I believe it. That said, even if I agreed with you on Oregon, those would be the two obvious teams in college football this year to enter into elite status. Let me ask you this, and this is going away from the league for a moment. Would you put Texas in elite, or would you have them in this category? Would you have them in the upper crust of the SEC or in the elite category of the SEC?
Upper.
You would have them in the upper.
Well, in fact, stick a pin in that. We can do the same exercise
SEC?
with the SEC tomorrow.
That would be very interesting. All right, so we'll do that tomorrow. Michigan, I think, is such a fun test case because, again,
Michigan was the team I considered for the other.
More than Oregon.
Because they have done it.
Yeah,
And they, obviously they played in the title game
2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it all depends on how much you weigh. I mean, your formula is a little bit different in mine.
I think I'm looking a little more forward and you're looking a little more back, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think Michigan popped back up after many years down, and now I think they're going back down, though they're not going to be as low as they were last year. I got to see it from Sherrell Moore, and I got to see that, I don't know, what if stuff comes for them and they get in a lot of trouble? I mean, they're in trouble. What if those punishments affect them? So unbiased Josh.
So you're finally acknowledging they're cheating.
Well, that maybe some people think they were cheating, but it's all alleged, John. In all seriousness, I think Michigan's going to be very, very good. I think they're going to be able to beat Ohio State. I mean, they did last year. And I think they're going to be able to win a lot of games. I would be very surprised, though, if they were a national championship contender again. But I also was surprised that they were a national championship contender under Harbaugh. That was one of the more, them and Notre Dame, them being that good is kind of a shock to me as a Midwesterner that thought outside of Ohio State, it's really difficult for schools in our area to do this. The next one I think is the most interesting because
it's the most interesting and it's the one with zero disagreements.
Oh my gosh, we agreed on everything. Damn it.
We literally, we're
Same
talking
teams.
9 schools.
Wow.
9 schools, and we agree on all 9 in the middle class.
I cannot believe let's put a pin in Nebraska. We'll get to them. I can't believe we agreed on Indiana, and I can't believe.
What do you think?
I almost had Indiana lower.
Really?
Yeah, but then I was like, God, they made the playoff, and you got to bump them up, and I do believe in Sigs. So if I believe in Signetti, I gotta have them in the middle class.
This is certainly one of those where if you wanted to poke holes in my argument about having seen you done it, yes, Indiana's just got 1 year of doing it, but it was done at a fairly high level.
If you were just going off last year, they should be in the other category.
And it would be hard for me to sit here and argue that Indiana doesn't belong at least in the same class as Nebraska. In fact, I could see some people from Indiana saying, whoa, wait a minute. Why are we stuck with these dregs after we ran them off the field last year? But I'm also trying not to, and this is why I was a little surprised we didn't talk more about Michigan in the elite class, because one of the arguments would be, well, but what's been the scoreboard recently? We've beaten Ohio State.
They have.
But it's
about more than that.
I can't just lean strictly on game results because, yes, occasionally programs that are a little bit lesser do beat programs that are a little bit higher.
Yeah, and so that's why I bet Iowa fans are actually the most frustrated by this category because they're saying, why the hell are we in the same category as Nebraska? And that's a very fair question. And hell, there are a lot. This one was the most difficult Because it's like, should I put Wisconsin here still? Do I still believe that Wisconsin is going to be a middle-class type program?
This one was actually...
Was it your easiest?
It was pretty easy.
Yeah, it was just...
Actually, for me, I mean, I came... Outside of the inner debate I had with Michigan, I didn't really debate a lot of other things.
See, I did, because I said, am I giving too much love to Nebraska? If we just, did this exercise with, 10 media members in every other Big Ten locale, how many of them would have Nebraska in the middle class? And so thus are we overrating them? I wonder the same thing about Wisconsin. Illinois, Minnesota, like honestly, all the old Big Ten West schools I think are pretty interesting in here. Michigan State was the one I really struggled with because I don't really know if I believe in them a whole lot moving forward under Jonathan Smith, but they also like the next category, we just get into dregs territory, and I don't think that these schools are dregs category, territory.
No.
Jimmy says it's hard for me to put Nebraska here, but I get it.
It feels weird having Indiana and Nebraska here.
So what would you do with one or the other? Would you leave Indiana and drop Nebraska, or would you?
I would drop them both to a lower class.
But that's the fun part about this discussion. See, I think you're going to disagree with yourself, though, Nick, because when John shows you the next class, you're not going to think that the Indiana belongs in there.
No.
Though a year ago you would have. But, I mean, they just made a playoff. Like, we got to give them some flowers.
You do have to give them their flowers. And let's face it, that's the thing about the middle class. Whether it's in societies or in exercises like this, it's usually the largest class.
Yeah,
because there's just a lot of people in the middle, and I can't look at any of these 9 teams and call them upper class.
No.
I also can't look at any of those 9 teams and call them lower class.
Because that's the next category, right?
Now, let's say if Indiana just had a mess season last year.
What if we do this a year ago? Indiana is in the worst.
Or they're at least 1 down for sure.
I think they're 2 down, yeah.
And so, yes, there
a recency bias? Of course there is.
But it's a pretty healthy recency bias because it was a double-digit win team that went to a playoff.
Yes,
they say that out loud. Indiana football went to the playoff.
Indiana last year was not 500. Indiana last year was 11-1. If they were 500, then they would probably be in the next lowest category. But they were 11-1. 11-1, and they made the playoff.
Lower class. I have 4 teams: Maryland, Northwestern, UCLA, and the Rutgers. Josh only has 2 of those teams.
Yeah, I didn't have Northwestern and I didn't have UCLA. There was actually a first draft of my email to you with my list of teams where I had both of them in this class, actually, in Northwestern and UCLA. I always had Maryland. I always had Rutgers in this one. So those ones are pretty easy. Arguments for Northwestern and UCLA being in the lowest class. I think my Northwestern one is that I just don't buy into them being anywhere near this level on a regular basis moving forward, even though they are only 1 year removed from a surprisingly good year under David Braun. But last year they sucked. I think they finished 4-8. They were not a very good football team. And I do think as we get further away from the Pat Fitzgerald era that we're going to look back and say, wow, that guy, he was doing some weird crap, but he was great.
I agree.
He was really good. UCLA, I struggled with them because I think that they have capabilities of being a solid program, but they just are so poor and they don't spend much money, and I just kind of worry about them. Though I hear your argument. Whatever your arguments are for either of those teams.
You know what my main argument is? I don't LA. See I might have been able to see, I almost thought about bumping Maryland up
to middle class. They have been a middle class program a lot of the time, yeah.
But then and again, some of this can be a little unfair. But Maryland also has, they've had their money issues.
Yes.
And do I trust them to constantly, be in that conversation? That's the only debate I really had. The honest reason why these teams were separated from the absolute bottom, because as strong as I see Ohio State, I see Purdue as weak. To me, Ohio State is at a level nobody else is at in this league.
Yeah.
And to me, Purdue is at a low level that nobody else is at in this league.
Yeah, that's fair.
Their last 2-3 seasons they've
been horrid.
Absolutely horrible. I mean, they
made the conference championship game 2 years ago, and now they are awful.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like a program that has no direction.
Yeah.
And so that honestly, that was if this would have only been a 4-class exercise, then I wouldn't have been able to separate out. I either wouldn't have been able to separate out Purdue or separate out Ohio State.
Max says Ryan Walters really did a number on that program. He definitely did. Now, what do you think of this comment from Joel? Nebraska hasn't had a winning conference record since 2016. They're below middle class and not far from the basement.
I mean, yeah.
3-6, 3-6, 3-6, 1-8, 3-5, 3-6, 3-6, 3-6.
I guess this brings into question something else as a consideration that I did use, and that is I looked at the support.
Yeah, I just mentioned it with UCLA. They're poor.
You look at the finances.
Yep.
You look at the support.
Yep.
If this were strictly based on record, then it would have been easy. We could have just lined up all the records and just slotted them in thusly.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't have been as easy an exercise because the Pac-12 schools have only had 1 year of play in the Big Ten. So, and that's not as fun a conversation. When you do a conversation like this, it's what do you all factor? And honestly, one of the reasons why I had lifted Nebraska up into the middle class, some of it based on what I expect them to do next year. The other part of it is, unlike a Purdue, and I'm not saying Purdue is dirt poor or anything. I mean, they do obviously have money.
It's a basketball school, though.
But it is a basketball school.
But Nebraska's had this kind of support and money flowing into the program for a while.
Oh,
even
yes.
when they were doing bad.
Yes.
Bad.
Yes.
But also,
Agreed.
Nick, so I understand the point you're making, and to go back to what Joel said, our middle classes are huge, though.
Yes.
Our middle class mine gets to team number 11 in the rankings, and yours, because you only had, 2 in your previous one,
You're
right?
saying Nebraska's lower middle class is still middle class.
Well, yeah, so John
Sure.
has 3 teams combined in the basement, and what was the other
Lower
one? Lower
class.
class. No, 5 combined? Yeah, 5 combined
I have
teams.
5 combined teams.
And I had what?
And you have
6 combined team. 5 combined. So we both have 5 combined teams. So that's 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. And so that means that Nebraska, if you want to have them at the lowest of the low and middle class, they would be 13th. Do you know where they finished last year in the Big Ten? 12th. So I actually think that kind of fits,
Sure.
though maybe I'm fudging the definition just a little bit.
Right. But again, this exercise, things that I weigh might be a little different than what Josh weighs, might be a little different from what you weigh.
Yeah.
But I'm just giving you my rationale for why I think, because a little bit of this is projecting forward, and a lot of this is looking in the rear view. But there's also the concept of just how well are you supported? Like right now, if push came to shove, if Nebraska needed a new quarterback or needed a new point guard, where are they going? They're going quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
If Purdue needed a new quarterback or a new point guard, where's Purdue going?
Point guard.
So some of this is a little bit of punishing Purdue for having different priorities, which is fine. That's not a value judgment. But, I mean, you look at the football program right now, and it's bad.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad.
Happers Meme Guy says Nebraska and Indiana could be considered on the same tier now, but one has been trending down while being called a sleeping giant for 20 years, while the other appears to have awoken support for football and finally hired the right coach. 2 programs trending in opposite directions. I am infinitely curious to see what Indiana football is under the next handful of years.
I agree.
Their win total is 8.5. So Vegas does not view them as this team that was a flash in the pan and is about to take a huge step back. If they hit the under with 8-4 or the over with 9-3, I mean, that is still way better than Indiana has been throughout the majority of my lifetime. I think that he is a really good coach. I don't think they're going to be a playoff contender very often, but can Nebraska be?
Now, this question probably doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but if we did this exercise the last year of Frost or the first year of Rule, would Nebraska still be like lower middle class, or how much is the support propping them up,
I would have had to. I would have had to have put them in the lower class level.
I mean, it does help that they are coming off of a 7-6 season.
Mm-hmm.
It really does.
It does.
You're right, though. If we did this
6-6 with a bowl game.
If we're doing this in 2022,
let's say it's when they hire Matt Rule. That moment, they came off another 4-8 year, which came off a 3-9 year, which came off a 3-5 year. Like they were.
I mean, sure. Would have all the other things like the financial support, the fan support, all those things are still true? Yes, but it did help. I'll listen if someone is listening from Iowa country or Northwestern country or wherever and saying we're by. Sure, I can't argue that.
Correct.
I can't argue that. I tried not to be biased, but also it's hard for me to look at this and say, well, if Nebraska doesn't belong in there, does Minnesota belong in there?
Yeah, or Wisconsin.
Does Illinois belong in there?
That's why it's the middle class, you know?
It's the middle class. It's a big group. Now, some people in the middle class neighborhoods have 2 cars. Some of them just have 1 car, but they're all still middle class.
Correct. Yeah,
it's a big class.
I think that's a great way to put it, because if Nebraska's not, then all right, it's time for us to knock down Michigan State. It's time to have a conversation about Wisconsin. Are we judging Illinois off of one really good year? So then it suddenly turns into like, well, we need to push everybody down, and then everybody is suddenly in the, because none of these teams should be moving up. Iowa, it would be the only one that I would hear as a conversation, but they don't belong in the second crust of the sport. They're not a playoff contender. And USC, I guess maybe you could say, but Josh, USC, they could be better, and they can be, and but they would be the most likely team from this group to leave, but they're not. Otherwise, like year 200 Jed Fish at Washington, like what's to say that they're not going to fall off? So that's why this is the middle class. I think that those teams fit. It's pretty hilarious that this is the only one that we agreed on.
This is
we didn't agree on any other category.
9, and we both had somewhat different metrics that we used to weigh what to do, and yet we came up with the same 9 teams.
Half the league we have in the same class.
And you weren't even that far off on your other classes either.
No,
we really weren't. It was
a tiny bit of
it was one team here or there.
Yep.
That was it.
Look at that.
Well, tomorrow might be interesting because
SEC?
The SEC.
All right, that'll be fun.
Oh gosh.
See, because I think Texas is. We already had the discussion, but they're a fascinating test case. They made 2 playoffs in a row. They made the quarterfinals or semis in back-to-back years. But you say they're not elite. Here's
the question:
elite.
Are we going to weigh? Because when I did this exercise, I was looking at the Big Ten. I was also kind of looking at the bigger picture,
like national.
With the SEC, are we going to compare what we did? SEC is the SEC middle class the same as the Big Ten middle class?
So what are you saying? Is like an SEC middle class team better than a Big Ten middle class team? And so if
it could.
I think you have to look at it inside of their own conference.
Or are you saying like an SEC middle class would be Big Ten upper class? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, kind of, but because one of the arguments is the reason why the SEC is perceived to be so strong is that their middle class is better.
Then in theory, that should feature either really good teams or a lot of teams. I don't know. I would say approach it how you approach this and see what you spit out.
Okay.